If we think a little bit further about these correspondences between music and action, we can sort of look in detail at how the body moves and what kinds of rhythms it generates. And we start to see these correspondences that are very clear. Because we have to keep reminding ourselves that music came from us. It didn't just come to us, it came from us. So it was made of things that we do. It couldn't ever be any other way. And so because of that, we can notice things like the correspondence between the breath and what we call a musical phrase. If I sing to you, which I'm not going to do, because there are better people at singing, but if I did sing to you, eventually I'd run out of breath and I'd have to take a breath. And that creates a sort of natural length for a phrase. So you can think of breathing as one of the inherent rhythms. It's one of the things that our body does, that conditions or structures the way we make music, especially the way we sing. So this is the kind of correspondence that you see between music and the body. But in this case, it seems a little obvious because of singing. But then when you think of phrases on a piano or a dance phrase, you realize that maybe that creates a sort of just a temporal scale for us, that we are a sort of a time scale of like a few seconds. The time to take a breath. It might be, if you're running, you might be like one breath every second. If you're really relaxed, it might be one breath every 10 seconds. So it's a pretty fuzzy and wide range. But not much else in the body is on that time scale. That's sort of unique to itself. So we can think about musical phrases. We can think about how the body sort of sways. Sometimes when I go to a concert, I see people doing this. And it's kind of around the same tempo as breathing. It's not necessarily synchronized with it, but it has a similar kind of sway to it. You might think of a moderate arm gesture like this. Or you might think of a string of notes in a melody, slurred together. So that's what we call a phrase, at least in Western music. And like I said, it's between about 1 and 10 seconds long. Slightly faster than that, we can think about the heartbeat. We can think about the speed at which we walk. We can think about the speed at which we might bob our heads to music. If you ever go to a hip-hop concert, you'll see a lot of people doing that, bobbing their heads. We can think about the speed at which the jaw moves up and down when we chew on food, or when a baby is born with what's called the infant sucking reflex. And as soon as it finds the mother's breast, it starts sucking with a certain rhythm that's around the same time scale, actually. So these are all in the same range. And it's about between 1 and 3 per second. Or you could think of it in BPM as between, say, 60 and 180. This is also a fuzzy range. You could go a little bit slower than that or a little bit faster, maybe. But phenomena that these are all the things that the body does that's in that time scale, in that range of speed or tempo. And of course, if you know anything about, say, DJing or making music, that tends to be the range in which most musical pulse or beat. If I played you a song off the radio and asked you to tap your finger to it or tap your foot to it, you would choose a tempo that's in that range, somewhere between around 60 and 180 beats per minute, or about between 1 and 3 per second. So that means that the body kind of prefers tempi in that range, or likes to hear a beat somewhere in that range. It's because it corresponds to things that the body does. like I said, the head nod, the pulse, walking. So that's what we call pulse. It's also what the ancient Greeks called tactus. So that range of tempo is between about a third of a second and a second, about 1 to 3 beats per second. We do things faster than that too, though. In particular, speech is faster than the tactus, or faster than what we call pulse. It's made of syllables, which are in the realm of a tenth of a second, or maybe a little more than that, maybe around a third of a second. It's also a fuzzy range, you know. Some people talk really slowly, and some people talk so fast that I can't understand them. So, you know, we can have a whole range of ways of speaking. Some languages have a kind of faster rhythm than others. Some languages have a constant rhythm, like French has what they call syllable timing. English has something that we call stress timing, where the rhythm has to do with where words are accented. But in French, the syllables tend to be all the same length, so they speak more like this. I can't really do it. But that sort of gives you a certain difference in how languages might have different rhythmic profiles. But in general, the speed at which syllables happen is around a tenth to a third of a second. That's also the speed at which we can do things like move our fingers or play with both of our hands. And of course, that's what we do with instruments. We might move fingers on the keys of a saxophone, or on the keys of a piano, or we might play on a hand drum, or we might use sticks to move around that speed. So the basic sort of rhythmic actions at the unit of rhythmic action tends to be in that same range that we associate with speech. That's not a coincidence. It's because we're good at processing information at that speed. That's why we speak at the speed that we do, and not 10 times as fast, or not 100 times as slow. It's a certain rhythm that's inherent to how the mouth works, how the jaw works, and how the brain works. And that all evolved together. So there's basic correspondence between information in music and information in speech, especially in terms of the time it takes, the temporal rate of flow, is not a coincidence. It makes sense because it all came from us as a species. The smallest time scale that I've identified in music is connected to what we call a phoneme. If you can hear the difference between when I say the word kick and the word click. Did you hear that difference? If you did, then you can hear information on the time scale of hundredths of a second. 30 milliseconds, you know, about 30 units per second. So that's pretty fast, right? It's faster than you can really count, or even faster than it seems you can think. But somehow you're able to process and differentiate sounds at that time scale. This is similar to the time scales I was talking about earlier. The reason that we can tell if someone's moving toward us or away from us. The reason we can tell what a room is shaped like by just listening to the way sound reflects inside of it. The reason we can tell the difference between a man and a woman walking just by listening. That's a similar timescale to what's called the phoneme in language. It's also has to do with the timescales at which we synchronize our actions. Or in other words, what's called groove is made of attention at this very fine time scale, hundredths or even thousandths of a second. why is it that certain drummers feel more in the pocket than other drummers? Some seem more on top or rushing. Some feel behind the beat. And then how do people relate to each other when they're playing a pulse that's really fast? They synchronize at the same time scale that I'm talking about. I call it micro-timing. And it's very salient. It's what makes the difference between Ray Brown and Paul Chambers, for example, or between Vinnie Colaiuta and Gene Lake, to name some famous and fabulous musicians. The way they interact with others and the way they play rhythms has detail in it that we can't name or write down, but we can feel it because it's there and it's ordered. It's not random. It's very careful and it's very deliberate. And people work on it their whole lives to refine it and make it communicate. So this thing that we call feel in the realm of rhythm, in the realm of groove, that is happening at the time scale of the phoneme, thousandths of a second. The study of the brain keeps advancing, and we keep learning more and more things about it. About 20 years ago, some scientists noticed something interesting, that newborn babies could imitate the actions of a grown-up without having ever done it before. You may have seen these famous photographs of a scientist sticking out his tongue, and then the baby sticks its tongue right back out, and making other kinds of funny faces. Perhaps you've seen this in the babies in your life, that they have this kind of capacity. It was also observed not just in humans, but in primates, other primates. So you may have seen also these famous images of a monkey imitating a scientist, doing some very basic actions. So then scientists propose that this seems to be some kind of neural basis for what we call empathy. The fact that we can understand each other's actions means that maybe that's the foundation for how we can understand each other at all. What I would argue is that the fact that we're able to make music together through synchronizing with each other displays that understanding of each other's actions. In other words, that music is empathy. It's how we're able to be together, listen together, hear each other, and create in time together. So I believe that all these scientific proposals I've made about where music comes from and how it works actually lead us to this sensibility that music and empathy are the same thing. Thank you.